huge feast for like Srila Prabhupada's Tirobhav, his disappearance day, and Janmashtami. You know, Vrindavan, we had some very big festivals. And I always made sure that the devotees who were serving the prasadam, that we had a plate, say that they could make a plate for themselves before they served prasadam. And that way, they weren't always worried, oh, if I give this person too much sabji, well, we're running out of this, I'm not going to get enough to eat. Oh no, I've been fasting all day. So I thought, make their mind shanti, make their mind peaceful. We set aside plates for all the servers, and then they could, you know, distribute the prasadam with a lot more, with no worry about themselves, and just offer it as seva to Krishna. So that's not exactly answering your question, but one time a devotee stole some Mahaprasadam from another devotee, and Prabhupada said, very intelligent. So it's not the end of the world, because at least it's prasadam, right? But at the same time, we should be, ultimately we should be, you know, it's prasadam seva, right? With that, the prayer, you know, Sharira Avijajal, right, is titled Prasadam Sevaya. We're supposed to be doing service when we're taking prasadam, not just, you know, shoveling it into our mouth. You know, it's actually meant to be a meditative. I know this may be hard to imagine in our busy days, but it's meant to be meditated on and actually experience the texture and the taste of the prasadam, and not to eat fast, but to eat slow, you know, to slow down and take prasadam nicely. And Prabhupada also said not to talk about big, heavy, you know, you don't have to talk about big philosophy. He said light talk, light Krishna Katha, light discussion, or he would often take prasadam in by himself and just meditate on the taste of the prasadam. So where does the line draw? Well, you know, if we're taking all the paneer and then that's upsetting other Vaishnavas, that's not so nice. So we should try to, but you know, like I said, it is the only sense gratification. We're following all the regulated principles. We're doing all these things. So, you know, sometimes prasadam is the one shelter that we have. So if Mahaprasadam, you can beg, borrow, or steal, but you know, paneer sabji, leave some paneer for the other devotees. There's some things in the chat here. Let's see. Majority, it happens like we cook according to our desire. How to practice like cooking for Krishna's pleasure? Well, Vinita, we may, you know, if you, let's say we're cooking for our family, and we know that our husband really doesn't like Loki sabji, right? Just doesn't like Loki, right? So we probably won't cook Loki. We'll probably go to the market and buy other sabjis, right? But then once we've done that and we have the ingredients, we should really try to focus, even though we know my children like this, my husband likes this, whatever, my parents like this. When it's time to actually do the cooking, we try to focus on Krishna's pleasure. I was very fortunate for 1 month, where my house in Vrindavan has 2 apartments, ground floor and +1. And so for 1 month, many years ago, my gosh, probably 25 years ago, maybe, we were so fortunate to have Mother Jamuna living upstairs, the Prabhupada's disciple, Mother Jamuna, one of the most famous devotees in our movement, one of the most advanced devotees in our movement. And, you know, she learned cooking from Srila Prabhupada. and she wrote that award-winning cookbook, Lord Krishna's Cuisine. And for her, cooking was a total offering of love. She would chant the whole Mangala Charana before she cooked. And Prabhupada had trained her that the kitchen should be spotlessly clean the whole time you're cooking. The whole time, not that you clean at the end, but while you're cooking. So I noticed, the kitchen was always spotlessly clean, even as she's doing adding this and that. It was all, she was cleaning as she cooked, and she was chanting, and she was in such spiritual consciousness when doing that. And you could taste it, and the prasadam was just from another universe. It was so easy to digest, and it was so light and subtle. And because she was such an advanced devotee. So we try. So we may have to. Oh, the other thing. Here's a little hint, Vinita, that I often tell devotees. So okay, you're going shopping for boga, but make sure at least one item is exclusively for Krishna. Right? You're not thinking about your family at all or this, that, but at least one item, you're just for the deity's pleasure or the picture of Krishna. And that's a nice thing. Sometimes we buy those really big dates. You can get them, they're usually imported from the Middle East. And that's one thing that, okay, that's for our Giriraj. Okay, I hope that's helpful, Vinita. And Ratika Mataji says sometimes when we make boga and forget to put salt, and we get to know after offering, so yeah, you can add, yes, you can have prasadam salt, right? You can take some salt from a container, offer it, a portion of it to Krishna, then consider the rest of that prasad. And then of course you can do that. Yes, that's not a problem. As a matter of fact, for my wife, she always tries to make a little, if she's going to make a mistake, make it a little less than a little more. You can always add salt, but you can't subtract it. And if you're not sure on the plate that you're giving Krishna, you can just give a little container of salt, so that if it's a little less salt, Krishna can add it. Ranji Kant says, can we honor prasadam in the mood of pleasing Krishna within us? Well, yes, or Krishna without us also, but just Krishna, we're trying to please him. Is it okay to plan a menu for full week or follow our instinct on daily? Well, that's as you like, whatever makes sense. It's nice to have a standard menu, because then you don't have to you don't have to use a lot of mental energy trying to decide what are we going to eat today, what are we going to offer today. If you just have a standard menu, you don't have to spend that mental energy. You spend it one time to create the menu, and after that, it's done. Okay, anything else on prasadam?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Rasasindhu Giridharidas. I have a couple of questions. One is
one
regarding,
at a time.
Yeah, one at a time, yes. So when we are honoring prasadam, and especially when we are in the temple and during the feast, sometimes the serving devotees are very, very generous, and they give very large portions of servings. And let's say sometimes also the situation that you don't like some of the items which are there in the feast as well. So practically it becomes very difficult to finish the whole thing or eat the whole thing. And we have seen sometimes devotees then either discarding or disposing that prasadam from their plate. So how do we handle situations like this?
Well, first of all, let's know, there is a standard on how to serve prasadam. I was fortunate enough to take prasadam sometimes with His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he was trained by Prabhupada directly, and he was very strict, very strict. And we all know, right? If you go to a Paka Grihasta's house, and they're making fresh chapatis as you're eating, right? Or I don't know in South if it's like that. And they usually, especially in Bengal, they'll sometimes make 8, 9, 10 different sabjis. Some shukta, some this, that, some sak, and they just give you a little portion. And then when that's done, they give you a little bit more and a little bit more. Now I know that's hard when it's a big, big feast. I appreciate that. It's a little challenging, but still, the best thing is we give reasonable portions, and then we go around second time, third time, and not just plop, plop. and the like I said, the servers should be sattvic, and they should be satisfied that there's enough for them, like I mentioned before, and then they should really be in the mood of service. But I'm sure we've all had experience sometimes, the servers, like, you can almost feel like they would rather be taking prasadam than serving. And you just go plop, they're not, but it's supposed to be, Vaishnava Seva. So the servers should be in good consciousness, and really we should finish everything on the plate. We should not waste prasadam. We should not waste prasadam. So if you know ahead of time that there's a prep that is something that you just can't take, you have to put your hand over the plate very quickly. No. Sometimes when you're in Gujarat, right? Gujarati Mataji, she's just like slipping more prasadam this way and that way while you're not looking, and you can't even walk out of the house afterwards. But so that servers should be trained. We should really put some consciousness into the honoring of prasadam. It can really, really make a big difference. I used to be fortunate sometimes to take prasadam during the GBC meetings with Jai Pataka Maharaj, and also sometimes the Bhakti Chu Maharaj, and they were very careful the way their servants, it was so pakka. It was so nice, and then Jai Pataka, then afterwards he gives you gifts. He always gave gifts. He'd give a gumsha and some Nishingadev oil, and like this, Yeah. Your second question?
Yeah, Prabhu. So second question, you said that, many of us in this group are also, corporate employees and have a lot of travel to do. And often we have to kind of eat outside in the restaurants. And you did mention in the earlier session, earlier today, that when we are in a situation like that, we can offer it in our minds to the Lord and then honor. And also it happens to be a situation when you're sitting with a group, and like, especially when we're traveling to Western countries, we also see that many of the other people on the table would also be eating meat on the same table. And like when, let's say, we are offering this even mentally, whatever salad or whatever we might be eating. So does it result in any other consequence? I won't say consequence, but it's on the same table ultimately.
No, if we can avoid, that's great. But if we can't avoid, if it's part of our job, what to do? So we, at least, like I said, though, sometimes it's a opportunity. I have a good friend who one time was at a program, and he was sitting at the same table as the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama is not a vegetarian, believe it or not. He seems like a nice person, but he's not a vegetarian. So he ordered chicken or something, and my friend ordered a salad. And very carefully, he said, no onions, no garlic, just some olive oil, salt, bas. And he started this whole conversation with the Dalai Lama about being vegetarian. And the Dalai Lama was eating like trying to hide his face as he was eating across from the devotee. So it could be even a good preaching thing. Now, I don't know if this is possible. When I travel in America a lot, not during COVID. I haven't traveled for a year, but I used to, because my work for the government, I used to spend about 110 nights a year in a hotel. So I used to travel with a little cooker, almost like Prabhupada's little cooker, and every day I would just cook for myself. Very simple, just some like khichdi every day, and some salt, some olive oil, whatever I would do, but just very simple. But that way I wouldn't have to go out and eat. But that's because I traveled a lot, and I just had a big suitcase, and the cooker doesn't take up so much space. And that's what I did because I was traveling so much, and I did not want to eat at restaurants. But we do what we can. One nice thing, if you're really, really starving in India, is some restaurants will have, I don't know if it's so much in Bangalore, but they'll have a Jain menu. And that means no onion, garlic, pakka, right? So that's kind of nice. I remember I was in Jabalpur, and I think it's Madhya Pradesh.
In Madhya Pradesh, yes.
Yeah, and a lot of Jains there. So I was at they have there the National Judicial Training where they train judges. So I was giving some seminar there, and so I just ordered Jain food and said, Krishna, please accept this. We try to avoid grains cooked by, especially grains. Prabhupada says it makes the mind wicked. And for some reason, so like for some, I don't, exactly understand the karmic thing, but there's less karma involved in fried things. It's called pakka, right? And kacha is like rice. There's more karma in things like rice, apparently. And Prabhupada even sometimes, not often, but would have a kachori or a samosa like right from the platform of a train station. It was fried.
Right.
But still, obviously, Prabhupada preferred, taking at the temple. Okay, we could talk about prasadam all night, but we should probably move on. Oh, it's actually morning for you. It's night for me. Okay. So then Prabhupada talks a little bit about the genitals, about sex. And he says, as far as the urges of the genitals are concerned, there are two, proper and improper, or legal and illicit sex. When a man is properly mature, he can marry according to the rules and regulations of the Shastra and use his genitals for begetting nice children. That is legal and religious. Otherwise, he may adopt many artificial means to satisfy the demands of the genitals, and he may not use any restraint. When one indulges in illicit sex as defined by the Shastra, either by thinking, planning, talking about, or actually having sexual intercourse, or by satisfying the genitals by artificial means, he is caught in the clutches of Maya. These instructions apply not only to householders, but also to tyagis, or those who are in the renounced order of life. So it is Prabhupada gave us such a nice way to practice the Garbhodang Sanskara, the yajna, or the process before begetting a child. And he said to chant at least 50 rounds of the Mahamantra. And so even begetting a child can be a very spiritual activity if husband and wife are both praying to Krishna to bring into this world a sincere or an advanced soul. So whatever momentary pleasure is there, if the focus can be on Krishna, you have that child for the rest of your life. So it's really a wonderful part of a marriage, actually, if husband and wife are both praying to the Lord to bring a pious Krishna conscious soul into the world. And it can be I say 50 rounds or more. Nothing wrong with 100 rounds, whatever it takes. It's a very serious thing to bring a soul into this world. And the Rishabdev says that Guru nasasyat, Sajini nasasyat, that don't become a father, don't become a mother if you can't liberate your dependence from birth and death. So why not bring a soul into the world that will liberate you? Because they're going to be advanced in Krishna consciousness. So any thoughts on that topic? Yes,
Hare Krishna,
Rasika
Prabhu.
Ratika Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, if we are serving in temple, we have a lot of services. So that time we know about Garbhadan Samskara and chanting 50 rounds, but it is difficult to chant 50 rounds. So, and follow everything. So is it okay chanting our 16 rounds and some more extra rounds, whichever is possible, while doing other services also in the temple?
Well, on a regular day, yes, but if you're going to try to conceive a child, then take the day off from other services and focus on your chanting. It's only one day or one day a month if every month you're trying to conceive a child. So why not try to, if the temple authority is a brahmachari, you may not want to explain why you're taking the day off. But if you can get someone to cover your service, well, it's not just take the day off, but if you can get someone to cover your services so that you can follow Prabhupada's instructions to do that, then why not do that? And even if the child is not conceived, at least you got to chant extra rounds. It's very good. It's such an important thing, Mataji, because like I said, let's say you're 30 years old when you beget a child and you're going to live till you're 75. You have to live with that day and that decision and that consciousness for the next 45 years of your life. So if you can get someone else to make the garlands or cook the offering or dress the deities or whatever it is for that one day a month until one gets pregnant, I think the temple management would understand unless they're sannyasi or brahmachari. Then you might not want to tell them exactly why. I know it's a little tricky if you're living in the temple but even then, I think a reasonable temple authority will understand the seriousness. Is that all right, Mataji?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Sure.
It's very nice to chant extra rounds. It's very nice.
Yes. But sometimes it's difficult when there are less devotees serving here. So.
Yeah, well, okay, I understood. And then what happens if you get pregnant? Then you're going to you'll have to stop your service for a lot longer when the child is born and you're in the hospital, and you can't just it's not good to just go back to doing your service like 2 days after giving birth either. So you may have to someone may have to look at the bigger picture of their life.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Please bless us. Thank you.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Other questions, comments? Okay.
Prabhu, I have one question.
To ask one more question on Prashadam issue.
Yes.
There are people who are absolutely fanatical. They will say they won't eat anything made outside, cooked outside, etc. And there are people who say that no, we got to be a little more practical. When I travel, I have to take care of my health. I have acidity. I have this and that. So I'll pick and choose maybe things which are Jain and honor it. And I forget about it then and there. But there are those who will be visibly fanatic about not wanting to take anything. They won't touch biscuits. They won't touch anything made outside, even juices, aerated drinks, nothing. So, I mean, what's the right? How do we actually look at this issue? So they give a complex.
Christian knows if we're doing it out of necessity, because we can also make excuses. Oh, I have acidity. Let me go to Haldiram's. And they have this very, very nice preparations at Haldiram's. I don't know if you have Haldiram's in Bangalore, but we do up north, we do up in even in Vrindavan, no, not Vrindavan, but many parts of Delhi have haldirams. So it's if it's practical, you know, like I said, Krishna knows if we're just making an excuse or if it's actually the situation, right? So if we can, the other thing is, if we are fanatical, you say fanatical, let's use a better word. If we are strict, we shouldn't force that on others. We should be strict with ourselves and lenient with others, and not like saying, "Oh, you're so bogus. I saw you having that lassi from that marketplace. You know, you're going to hell." You know, it's okay to be strict with ourselves, but we shouldn't, you know, find fault with others. But I think it's also a question of honesty with Krishna and with Guru, that, you know, if we understand that the best thing is we take just prasadam that's cooked from home or at a temple and offered to Krishna. And if we're in situations that we honestly can't get out of it and we have to have some sustenance to live and do our work or do our service, then we do what we can. Does that make sense? But if we know sometimes that, oh, I could eat at home, but on my way back, I do pass this place that makes the best doshas in the world. So let me have 5 of those before I come home, or, you know. Is that all right, Prabhu?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, we went from sex back to prasadam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
Prabhu, just coming back to the topic you just mentioned, to following the principle of no illicit sex. Mm-hmm. It seems that those who do get into the grihasthashram, most of them at least, do have a fair level of attraction to the opposite sex or to indulge in sex life too. Mm-hmm. So when I'm talking about even amongst those who follow devotional principles. In such a case, merely telling that sex is meant only for procreation may not help everybody. It seems like a training is required. What are the elements of that training so that one can follow this principle?
Well, the main element we'll be studying, if you want to look at chapter 2, verse 59 of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that when you have a higher taste, when you're enjoying spiritual life in a very intense way, then you have no desire. Prabhupada would quote Jamunacharya in Bhagavad Gita, and I think elsewhere as well. I forget which verse he quotes it in, but he says that now that I'm tasting the nectar of devotional service, when I think of sex life, I spit at the thought. Or Prabhupada would say, I spite, spite at the thought. I've heard him, you know, mention that in a lecture. So that is the main training is to get a taste for chanting, a taste for hearing, a taste for serving devotees, and enter into a prayerful mood. Then there can be also some practical parts of life. You know, sometimes it's said that if you eat too much heavy things, that can be agitating. You know, how your sleep, I'm not going to get into details here, but how your sleep arrangements can be a practical thing. How you use the internet and our mobile phone is also a very, you know, important part. So there's some practical things, because Krishna says in the Gita, Dhyayato Vishaya Pungsang Sankasteshu Bhajayate. So this is in the, if you need the reference, this is the 2nd chapter, I think it's verse 65 or 66. There's 2 verses that go together. And if you meditate on the objects of the senses, you become attached, you become attracted. And then, it's like a domino effect. It gets worse. And there's other things, cultivating the mode of goodness, making sure that, you know, we're eating peacefully, where our house is clean and neat, you know, things that bring about the mode of goodness. Because the mode of passion, Krishna says also in chapter 3, verse 37 of the Gita, if you could look at that verse, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajaguna Samudbhavaha, that Arjuna says, you know, where does this, how are we sometimes seem to be forced to do something that we know we shouldn't do? Anyone ever have that experience? And Krishna says, Kama Esha. He said, this is how lust affects us. And then there's also some training that we could do. And again, I'm not going to get into details in a big group like this, but on what to do if we are somewhat agitated. And basically, it's a good time to sit down, do some breathing, maybe do some pranayama and pick up our beads and try to take shelter of a spiritual activity and pray to Krishna. Pray to Krishna. Because what you're saying is not unusual. He said this is the Maitunya Agara, when you're in a prison, you know you're in the prison, right? Because the bars are there, right? But the material world, Maya is so expert that there's a prison, but there's no bar. You don't see the bars. It's just it's attraction for enjoying the senses. And it's so amazing that we there's no bars, but we're totally in prison. Is that all right, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Was there anything else?
I'm extending on the question that Shamakunda Prabhu just put. See, if both the spouse, I can't call it spice, but both the spouse are, following devotional practices, somewhere to understand this concept is relatively explainable, I would say. But if, let's say, one of the spouse is following devotional practice and one is not,
that's hard.
It's very hard in situations like that. So is there a way that we can kind of guide our members when questions like this come up in discussion?
That's hard. I used to spend some time in China, and we have that a lot in China. I find in India less, but in China more. There's the example of Srila Prabhupada's sister, that she would cook fish for her husband, and then she would take bath and then cook for Krishna and uses separate pots, separate everything. So she did her grihastha duties because her husband was, I don't know if he was not a devotee at all, but certainly his eating habits were not devotional. And then she would, so she didn't divorce, but she did that. It's really a case-by-case situation, and you try to talk to that couple. And it's also very important for the couple to talk to each other. And this could be very difficult around food. It could be very difficult around sex. It could be very difficult around bringing up children. Yeah. It could be very difficult about who we choose to be our friends. So there's a number of potential challenging situations, but I have seen that, I don't know if you saw recently this Mother Krishna Nandini, a very advanced Vaishnavi disciple of Srila Prabhupada. She passed away here in America a couple of months ago. And her husband was Muslim. But he got along very well with the devotees, and they worked it out, is what I'm saying. There may have to be some give and take, just like Prabhupada's sister. So it's, by the way, I'm very honored that I see we have Varda Krishna Prabhu here today, and that's very honored that he's taken time from his busy schedule to be with us. Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhu, don't mention it.
So let us continue.
I'm relishing every word you say. It's sweeter than the sweetest prasad I've ever had.
So let us move on to verse number 2, okay? So in this verse, it's, did someone want to say something? No. Let me just get my notes here. Okay. So in the verse that we just studied, in text 1, right, the necessity to control the mind and control the senses. Now in this verse, it describes what happens if we don't control our mind and senses, okay? So another verse, I think the first 3 verses we're supposed to memorize. Atyahara prayashascha prajalpo niyamagraha jana sangas chaloyamcha sadbir bhaktir vinashati. Vinashati means destroyed. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1, eating more than necessary, just as we were talking about, right? Or collecting more funds than required. That means you should not collect a lot of money for the temple, right, Varda Krishna Prabhu? No, that's wrong. No. We should go.
There's never enough.
Never enough.
Plans, so many ideas, so many projects, so many activities that Prabhupada wanted us to do. Actually, he wanted us to make the world completely Krishna conscious. No, that would need manpower, resources, etc.
Yes,
We
yes.
can use everything that comes by properly.
Right, so we'll talk about that. Yes, yes. Over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. Prabhupada would even use that word. Oh, that's an over endeavor, he would sometimes say. Talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. Practicing, this is a very interesting one. This is Niyamagraha and Niyamagraha. Practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. 5, associating with worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And 6, being greedy for mundane achievements. So Prabhupada begins the purport by first, well, the first line is very, very wonderful, right? Human life is meant for plain living and high thinking. I can tell you a little joke about that. Well, simple living and high thinking, right? Anyone know where that saying comes from, first of all? You should know.
I think it was attributable to Gandhi, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, yes, from Gandhi. Prabhupada, heard it from him. Very good. Yes. So in many, many years ago, in the 70s, Prabhupada established the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj was in charge. And so they were to preach to university professors and things like that. So in those days, devotees, we all slept on the floor, and very, very, very simple. There was no money, there was no couches or chairs, it was all on the floor, right? But the BBT, under Prabhupada's guidance, the BBT gave the BI, Bhaktivedanta Institute, money to rent an apartment in Atlanta and furnish it nicely so that they could bring professors and scientists over. So the devotees in the temple got a little envious. And they would say, instead of simple living, high thinking, they would say, high living, simply thinking. Okay. now Prabhupada gets into a very clear, in a few sentences, what the whole material and spiritual worlds are made of. Since all conditioned living beings are under the control of the Lord's third energy, Maya, this material world is designed so that one is obliged to work. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has three primary energies or potencies. The first is called Antaranga Shakti, or the internal potency. Okay. The second is called Tatastha Shakti, or the marginal potency, right? Because we know Tata, that means that doesn't mean Tata Industries and Tata Cars. It means the that place between not being in the water and not being on the land, like at the side of a river, right? The marginal, on the margins. That's Tatastha Shakti. The third is called Bahiranga Shakti, or the external potency. The living being entities constitute the marginal potency. That's us. We're in the middle. And we are situated between the internal and external potencies, being subordinate as eternal servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Jivatma, that's us, or atomic living entities, must remain under the control of either the internal or external potency. So that's such an important point, and even it answers that question again that was asked before of how do we overcome lust. We need to divim prakritim ashrita. We have to take ashrita, we have to take shelter of the internal potency, shelter of chanting, shelter of Vaishnava Seva, shelter of hearing Srila Prabhupada's writings. So this, I always just thought this was so nice, because everything is there, all the three energies. And then, of course, there's one other thing, right? There's only two things in the universe, Krishna and Krishna's energy, bas. And now the energies are divided here by three. Now I know if any of you were brought up in Sri Vaishnavism, sometimes they expand it more, right? To 16 energies and things like that. But these are general categories, because even the Antaranga Shakti in Lord Chaitanya's teachings is divided at least into three, Samvit, Sandini, and Ladini Shaktis, Satchit, Ananda. But still, it's very nice how in the very beginning of this purport, Prabhupada makes that really clear. Then he talks a little later in the purport, the word Mahatma refers to those who are broad-minded, not cripple-minded. Cripple-minded persons always engage in satisfying their senses, sometimes expanding their activities in order to do good for others through some ism, like nationalism, humanitarianism, or altruism. They may reject personal sense gratification for sense gratification of others, like the members of their family, community, society, national, international, etc. But Prabhupada is very strong. He says these activities may be all very good from the material point of view, but they have no spiritual value. What a strong statement that is. So we may have extended sense gratification, and we may even have what I like to call, I don't know if you're familiar with this word, vicarious sense gratification. You brag about someone else. Like I think I told you I used to work in the court system in India. So you talk about having to go to business meetings. So after the courts, the judges would always, generally would invite me to their bungalow, and they'd invite other judges, and you'd be with all these bigwigs there, and everyone's bragging about, well, my child is going to Oxford. No, my child is in USA. My child is big business, whatever, and they were all kind of like. It's also a kind of sense gratification. It's extended, right? You're important because your child's important, right? Or your parents were important, or your something like that. So it's still a kind of sense it's subtle, more subtle sense gratification. I can even remember, they say a pauper can be proud of their paisa, right? We can be proud of anything. So I remember one time I was in one of my mayas was my son was born in India, actually. He was born in Vrindavan. And when he was young, we taught him one verse before he went to Gurukul. And that was the verse spoken by Radharani, Tava Gatam Ritam Tapta Jivanam, Kavi Bir Idinam, etc. And so whenever like a sannyasi walked by or something, I'd say, Gopinath, quote that verse. And I would think, oh, he's such a pure soul, this, that. When my son grew up, he's 29 now, he used to tell me how he hated when I did that. But, it was a kind of extended sense gratification. So Maya can get us in so many big ways and small ways. They give us ways to forget Krishna. Some questions or comments on any of those points that we've made so far in verse number 2? Anything? No? Okay, I just muted you, Varda Krishna Prabhu, because I think there was some noise in the background.
Hare
So
Krishna.
please don't. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, are you going to elaborate on some of these things, or do we go ahead with questions right now?
You can go ahead with the question, and let's see if I'll let you know if I'm going to elaborate. You mean from the verse or from the purport that we've done so far?
From the verse, actually. So
okay,
maybe
well,
back a little bit, then we'll ask a little later.
Yeah, I think we will cover everything in the verse.
Yeah, so I'll hold back and then we'll ask. Maybe
Okay.
You already have the answers in your explanations.
Let us see. So then, Prabhu, I'm not reading every single point, but this is something that we should try to remember. He says the main problem confronting the conditioned souls is the repetition of birth, old age, disease, and death. So how often do we remember that? We get caught up in this happened at work, or I got a flat tire, or my favorite cricket team lost, or whatever. And they have these are the big problems. The big problem is birth, old age, disease, and death. And then Prabhupada says, in the material world, one has to work for maintenance of body and soul. But how can one perform such work in a way that is favorable for the execution of Krishna consciousness? So most of us on this call are grihastas, and so we're working. And so how to perform that work in a way that's favorable to Krishna consciousness? That may take some thought, some connecting it with Krishna, trying to use some of the fruits some of the money that we make in Krishna's service. And if it's really an occupation that has, it's against Krishna consciousness, we should see, can we find another occupation? Now, I know not everyone can do that, but it's that important that we should try to find a way to link our, at least it should not be ruining our Krishna consciousness, at least that much minimum. But we should try to find ways to do our duty and remember Krishna whenever is practical. I mean, if you're an IT specialist, it's hard to be, focusing your mind on, Radha Govinda, and at the same time solving a complicated computer problem. I recognize that, but we try as much as we can to remember Krishna as we're doing our duty. And then Prabhupada writes, everyone requires possessions such as food, grains, clothing, money, and other things necessary for the maintenance of the body. But one should not collect more than necessary for his actual basic needs. If this natural principle is followed, there would be no difficulty in maintaining the body. So in this purport, there's a lot about simple living, high thinking, right? Bare necessities of life is mentioned here. So how, I think we may have spoken about this last week, but how we apply that practically living in a major metro in India, surrounded by, everything, computers, cars, cell phones, this, that, all the, gadgets that are out there. That also, I would suggest we should be thoughtful instead of just thoughtlessly buying the latest mobile or the best car or this, that. We should actually just think, my life is meant to be Krishna conscious. I don't want to get too entangled in this world. At the same time, I need this, I need that in order to do my service, in order to do my job, in order to, put a roof over the head for my family. So we have to be practical, but I think we should examine our life carefully and see what is, at least what is a need and what is a want. And satisfy the needs, definitely pakka, and then think about the wants. I'm not saying don't do any wants. Again, grihastas are not sannyasis, they're not brahmacharis. There's some room for the wants, but examine them and see, are they really, can they either be neutral or anukul and not pratikul? Pratikul means unfavorable. Anukul means favorable. So we want to be careful about that, and at the same time be practical. So some thoughts on that. And one thing we want to try to avoid is the idea of trying to, well, as they say here in America, keep up with the Joneses, or, keep up with the Agarwals or the Patels or the Red Rouse or whatever, the big last name is in Reddy or whatever it is in Bangalore, trying to be better than the other person and have designer clothing. We have a, thing with a Ralph Lauren insignia on it or something, and that just shows that we're really, we have the, or Matajis have a designer handbag or whatever. Not that if you have one, it's not the end of the world, but the point is that sometimes that is almost like we take shelter of those things instead of taking shelter of Krishna. So there's nothing wrong with having, one time Prabhupada said that if you buy cheap things, you, what is it now? If you buy cheap things, you cry many times. If you buy good quality things, you cry once when you have to pay for it, right? So he wasn't against having quality things, but using quality things in Krishna's service is the key. I do remember one time in Delhi, the devotees bought His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj a BMW. And you can imagine how expensive that was, because the BMW already is expensive, and then when it's imported, it is so much more. And it might have been his birthday, his Vyasa Puja or whatever. So he walked out and he saw it, and he would not sit in it, and he said, immediately sell it. Immediately. He would not use it. And he just said, give me a nice car, give me a Honda or a Toyota, which is fine. They're safe, they're good, but I don't need a BMW, right? So he followed the principle here in this second verse of the Nectar of Instruction. And he was actually pretty upset. He said, sell the car and whatever extra money, give it to the book fund. So some thoughts, questions, comments on this point?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prabhuji, we earn not just for living and also for the support of the or for the Krishna consciousness. We also earn for term insurance, plan future, and we never know the limit. So now, if you see the medical expenses, the schoolings and all, so where is the limit? Like how much I should earn if I have one kid or two kid based on that?
You think I obviously I don't know the exact cost of living these days in Bangalore. I do remember I moved to India in 1988, and I'm amazed at how things have gotten a lot more expensive from when I was first living there. Let's just put it that way. These are the kind of things we just are practical, but there's some principles behind it, you know. Now, the ideal is, Prabhupada said, you give 50% of your income to Krishna, use 25% to maintain your family, and you keep 25% for emergencies. Now you might be saying, oh my God, I must be in the wrong movement. How's that possible? There's different explanations for this, because you see Rupa Goswami, with Prabhupada quotes Rupa Goswami did this though as he was renouncing, right? At the end of his Grihastha life, he gave 50%, but Prabhupada did not say that. He did say, 50%. So one way to look at that is that after expenses, right? After you paid your whatever, for the boga and I noticed I'm hesitating because when I first moved to India, there was no such thing as like mortgage. At least in Vrindavan, there was no mortgages, there was no car payments. You had to have all the money up front or bus, forget it. Now I know credit cards are in vogue and all these, but those of us on the call who are old enough to remember earlier times in India, it was different, right? As a matter of fact, it was considered a embarrassment to the family if you had a debt, right? But now everyone has debt. They buy a car on, even the rickshaw wala has a nice mobile that he bought. He's making payments every month, right? And he's used, what is it, Paytm? Is that he's charging on that in Vrindavan they use. So it's a question of being practical and being honest with Krishna. Those are the principles that I have to take care of my children. I want them to, get a good education so that, they will be, able to use their intelligence in Krishna's service as they grow up. We have to honor healthy prasadam. We need a reasonable place to stay, but we're not into showing off to the, our neighbors or our family members. We just have a different mindset. I remember all those times that I was with the Supreme Court judges at the parties and things, and they would always say, "Oh, so and so, they're in America now. They're very successful." And what does that mean if somebody says they're very successful? What does that mean? Anyone?
A lot of money.
Yes. Yes. Paisa. Exactly. That's what it means. And so I would always stop them and I would say, because they all knew I was a devotee. I used my name, Vraj Vihari. I said, well, I have a different definition of success. And they'd be like, they hadn't thought about that. So that is we don't want to climb the ladder of success in the material world and then at the end of our life realize that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall, right? So we want to be, a devotee is as thoughtful as a non-devotee is speculative, Prabhupada said, or as a materialist is thoughtless. So we don't want to get overly entangled in this world. At the same time, grihastas are not sannyasis, but we want to yeah, like that. We want to be careful, and we want to give as much as we can to Krishna, whether it's financial, whether it's our time, whether it's our intelligence. But, you know, grihastas can do a lot of service. Prabhupada was so proud that the devotees that preached in London, there were 3 household couples. He was so proud. He said, my sannyasi godbrothers went to London. What did they do? They came back with nothing. My grihasta disciples went to London and they spread Krishna consciousness all over England. They met the Beatles and all the things that they did. He was so happy. So grihastas can do a lot of service, But also remember that one of your services is to bring up Krishna conscious children. And the other service is to set an example of peaceful grihasta life, so that as we're cultivating people and making them devotees, that they'll be inspired by your example. Other questions or comments? Okay. We can do a little bit more. Oh, is that? Yes, Prabhu, go ahead.
Krishna Prabhu, then Prabhu. Prabhu, I have a question, because sometimes when we are in preaching, like a lot of young devotees, you know, who are in early 20s or something, they get inspired and they feel like they take the inspiration of leaving their jobs and those kind of things, because they believe that they want to dedicate to Krishna consciousness. But in later stages of life, they enter into grasta life and then they get into trouble financially and those kind of things. So as somebody like who is guiding to these kind of devotees, what should be our you know, way that they, because in early stages of Krishna consciousness, we feel, yeah, we can do a lot, but in later stages of Krishna consciousness, we realize that we have to do something. So how to balance this, Prabhu?
Well, I would leave that up to Varda Krishna Prabhu and Murli Sham Prabhu to give guidance on that, because I don't want to, it's kind of a managerial question in some ways, and I don't want to say something that's different than the policy of the yatra here. I can, yeah, that's probably, I mean, unless they want to go off mute and say what they think, I'd like to hear what they say first, because I would not want to say something that's different. You know what I mean?
Yes, Prabhuji, I understand.
Yeah. So I don't know, would Varda Krishna Prabhu or Murli Sham Prabhu, would you like to answer that? What is the standard here for young men who want to join the ashram? No, they don't want to answer.
Murli Sham Prabhu can take that question.
Murli Sham Prabhu, your thoughts? I think you're on mute.
In this temple, I have not handled anybody joining like that. So, and I have no policy. In this temple, I have not handled anybody who want to join, how it is done.
So if a young man comes and he, you know, passed out of, you know, college and says, I want to join the ashram, what do we say to him?
In this temple, I have not handled. So, previous temple, they had a different policy.
Sorry, Prabhu.
No, 1 minute. I will also clarify. I think Premadatta Prabhu was not about particular this temple.
Yes, not Brahmachari ashram, Prabhu.
It is about
like, you know, they want to reduce their, you know, job and they take simple jobs. I was surely not talking about Brahmachari ashram.
Okay, I thought you meant Brahmachari.
That's a very tricky part. I don't.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I'm so sorry. In that case, I'd be a little careful, you know, especially if they're in the same profession as you, then you probably can guide them appropriately. But, you know, sometimes if you have some passion and, you know, you're a young man, then you can establish yourself in a profession so that as you get a little older, then you can give more time to Krishna. But, you know, sometimes you're building up a business and you have to use a lot of energy to build it up. But then if it succeeds, then you can almost retire and, you know, hire other people to run the day to day. So I'm a bad example of this. What I did was I was a brahmachari for 11 years, and then I got married, and then I just did devotional. I didn't make any money, zero. I just did service for 20 years or so. And now only the last 10 years did I actually start making a little money. So I did everything backwards. I kind of like I went from almost like vanaprastha to grihastha. So don't use my example, but not that I was vanaprastha, that's not true. But I would, it's good to find balance, right? To be find a good balance. That's the only thing I could say in that matter. But it is sometimes found that when someone puts a lot of energy in their 20s into learning a lot about a certain profession and really, developing relationships and things like that, when by the time they're 40, they're very established, and they can sometimes do a lot more for the movement. A question came up in the chat to me privately. What's the difference between thoughtful and speculative? Because I quoted that statement Srila Prabhupada said, a devotee is as thoughtful as a non-devotee is speculative. So we are thoughtful by hearing from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and then thinking about how that applies in our bhakti. And the Jnani, or the non-devotee, is speculative because they're following whatever their mind dictates, like we said in the beginning, right? And udared atmanatmanam natmanam avasadiyat amaiva hyatmano bandhur amaiva viparatmanaha. The mind it can be very deceiving, as we heard from the Advanti Pramana. And so they're being chased around by the mind. Manoratain asato dhavato bahi, right? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that they're on the mental platform. And so the mind, they're just identifying with the mind, and wherever it goes, they go with it. But a devotee steps back and is thoughtful and says, okay, my mind is telling me this, but Shastra is telling me that. Which one should I choose? Oh, I think I should choose what Shastra says. So the devotee is thoughtful. I hope that answers that question. We only have 3 minutes left, but in the purport, Prabhupada talks about, different ism, like humanitarianism and other social work, as extended sense gratification. So if such activities are done with the intention of making few devotees, or maybe introducing people to Krishna consciousness, does it still fall under? No. If it's not extended sense gratification, it's service. It's just like we have the what is that called, Muralishampur? Anamrita, the Prasadam distribution program.
Yeah, we call it as Anamrita Foundation.
Yes, so we have that, and that is, feeding people. It's a humanitarian activity, but it also gives us very good press, and it also gives everyone who gets the food, they get prasadam. So it benefits in a number of ways. Ratika Mataji says, Her Grace Devaki Mataji during a class asked us to list different problems people face. And then she said, we can get solution for all of them if we stay near temple and follow simple living. Well, yeah, if that is our adhikar, if that is our, if we can do that, that's wonderful. Yeah, very nice.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can I have a quick?
You have 1 minute. Talk fast.
Yes, Prabhu. Prabhu, you mentioned very important point about upbringing Krishna conscious children.
Yes.
So how important is this? Because we have seen in many devotees' lives that parents are very, initiated parents, even they are very busy in their own services. Sometimes they ignore their children, and slowly what happens is we can see over a period of time, even a child who is born to a devotee parents slip away from Krishna conscious. Parents start thinking like, okay, they don't take the child with them to the Sunday program. They just leave them in some relative's home, or sometimes they're okay to, okay, he's just a child, let me give him some coffee or tea, or let him not follow Ekadashi because he's still very young. I mean, we see that we go out and preach that, no, Prahlad Maharaj says that we have to start in the age of 5, but within their own family, there is they ignore the children a lot, and over a period of time they slip away from Krishna.
Well, this is a big topic, but I'll make just a few points and we can talk about it more in subsequent classes. Prabhupada told Burijan Prabhu that your first service is to your children and your family, and after that, other devotional service. He actually told him that. It's in the book My Glorious Master. So if we bring children into this world, I quoted also earlier Lord Rishabdev, who said that don't become a guru, don't become a father, don't become a mother, if you can't deliver your dependents from birth and death. So it's a very serious thing. We bring, it's not a joke. The most important thing for parents is being happy in Krishna consciousness themselves. When a child sees that you're happy and enjoying the bliss of Krishna consciousness, then they become attractive. But you don't have to get on their case so much and chastise them so much, because they'll become attracted. But if we're, chanting our japa while looking at the computer or at our mobile phone and don't seem so happy as devotees, then that creates quite a samskar in their mind. But we should not neglect our children. If they're brought up, Prabhupada said that the children of your children will be able to light fire by mantra. They'll be so advanced. And so we had some challenges in the early days of Krishna consciousness with the Gurukul and things like that. But now we're seeing that devotee children who were brought up in a loving family are very powerful. They can be very, very powerful. So we should take that as an important part of our service. As they're teenagers, and especially because India is not what it was in the 80s when I first moved there. As teenagers, one has to be a little more intelligent how you encourage them, because when they're young, they're just like a sponge, right? They just soak up Krishna consciousness. Whatever you give them, they just love it. As they become older, they may have a mobile phone, and they see all the things that are out there in the world and the latest Bollywood movie or Hollywood movie or whatever, and one has to be a little it takes a little bit more intelligence to not push them too hard, but to attract them to Krishna, and maybe let them go a little wild, but not too wild. It's very different for each child. Okay, so our time is up for today, and we will continue studying the. I don't think you really need to. For those who are doing the homework, you don't really have to do homework for next week if you've done the second, because we'll just finish this second verse for next week. So we're not going to go. We're probably not going to get on. We're not going to go on to the third verse next week. So if you've already done the homework for the second chapter, the second verse, you are free. But if not, please try to read again this purport so that you have it's fresh in your mind for next week. And are there any announcements from our organizers?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for the wonderful class. I know will not hold you back, Prabhu. It's already 9:04 for you there. So we'll continue with some announcements for the devotees.
Okay.
But feel free to. Thank you very much. Prabhu.
Thank you. And again, my respects to Varda Krishna and Murli Sham Prabhu for attending this, and Hare Krishna to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. My Dhanavats to you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Krishna. just don't log off as yet. There are some points to be mentioned. So we have published the sequencing of the names so that we prefix with a number 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, so that it becomes easy for the devotees to at the back end to capture the attendance. So that's one. The second thing is on the homework as well as the assignments, especially the assignments. There are, as of last night, there were some 8 devotees who had not completed. I'm sure a few devotees would have completed, but I request the circle leaders to make sure they are uh, uh, talking to their members to ensure the assignments are completed well before time. It's very important that we give that. It hardly took 5-10 minutes. That's about it. So please do make sure your members are completing the assignments. It's very important. We are coming up with a set of principles and guidelines to say if you're not completing assignment consecutively for 2 or 3 times, what is going to happen and things like that. So just bear with us. Before next week, we will provide those guidelines. Just be judicious in making sure you're completing the assignments. Third point, very interesting point and very important point to note. And one of our senior devotees had mentioned about this. When we are asking questions to His Grace Vihari Prabhu, please refer those questions as what we are going through, right? So for example, question like, I'm just taking this an example and not about pointing of a particular devotee. A question like, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Prabhu, what if you're married and decided not to have children? So can we sort of change the question and say, what if we are married and decide not to have children? Instead of pointing to you as to Prabhu, it will be really, really respectful, because he's a very, very senior devotee, and he's very kindly accepted to give classes. So a little bit reframe your question to point to our own selves, asking the question, and not if you are doing this, if you are doing that. I know it is not an intent to refer to that that question to Prabhu, but it may sound a bit rude. So just try and make some slight modifications in the way we ask these questions. What else? Premdata Prabhu, is there anything else we had to?
Prabhu, the roll number one?
Attendance, yeah. Sorry. Sir, Prabhu, you want to say something?
The roll number, if there are 2 from the family, on the front, they have to.
Yeah, so roll number which we had suggested, if there are 2 or 3 members in the same family attending from the same device, we had given some procedure, the slight change in the process. So for example, instead of putting 10 Priyadarshana Das and then 11 Sham Mataji, I think, put the numbers, all the sequence numbers right up front. So like 10, 11, and then follow by the names, so that it becomes easier for the devotee who is capturing this data at the back end for the attendance. So I also found there are 3 members, for example, Sumedha Mataji, Sridhar Murari Prabhu, and Shankapani Prabhu, all 3 attending from the same family in the same device. So 66, 67, 68, and then follow by Sumedha, Sridhar, and Shankapani. So just make that slight modifications.
And although the guidelines will be coming, Prabhu, but then the attendance will be captured at the 15, basically 6:15 we will be capturing the attendance, although we have data at Zoom and all those things. But right. Just in the interest of time, we would prefer to do this process. And only in the case of there are some, specific cases with your connection issues and all that, please get back to your circle servants who will be informing the, organizers. So, because getting into too much of logistics, because the devotees who are doing that, it would require a lot of time. So in the interest of time, we are just simplifying the process by roll numbers, 6:15 it will be tracked. Anybody joining later than that, please inform your circle servant to inform the organizers to mark the attendance.
In essence, this is also showing a discipline and decorum to and the respect to His Grace Vihari Prabhu. He's, if you have noticed, this sharp 6 o'clock he is on time, and 7:30 we have to be mindful. It is 9 p.m. for Prabhu once he finishes the classes. So and most of us, I think, most of you are joining well before 6:05, 6:10. So that's wonderful. Let us continue that, and if we can improvise, maybe join 5 minutes before 6 o'clock, and we will probably introduce a short kirtan as well as we progress. But yeah, that's the intention and not for any other purpose. So I see 2 hands going up. His Grace Sham Kund Prabhu has put up his hand. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, will there be like essay questions if given at the end? If yes, can it be given now so that you can start preparing and noting down points accordingly and filling it up?
Essay questions will be there, Prabhu. I think from memory, it is part of the student handbook and worksheet. If it is not there, we'll just review that and then send all of you the essay questions.
So all the essay questions in the handbook have to be answered. Is that the way it is?
No, I think we don't have to write all the essay questions. I think 2 or 3 that the organizing committee will identify which 2 questions or 3 questions have to be answered. We'll streamline that as we progress, Prabhu. Sure, we'll give enough time before to say which are the questions to be answered, and we all can prepare for that. Thank you for. Rajnikant Prabhu has put up his hand.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah. Prabhu, one thing is like for the attendance thing. How easy to track through your naming thing, or instead of, is it possible to send a survey in between the class where we enter our name and roll number? One point is one.
No, Prabhu. So yeah, thank you. I think it's a very good thought.
Sometimes what happens, we might re-log in, or sometimes we log in with more than one device for various reasons. So it's not always possible to for all the devotees to edit and these things. Maybe that's what one kind of suggestion. Another, today we did not get to see the devotees. Is it any specific reason?
So Rajnikant Prabhu, that from a back-end perspective, Zoom gives all those details. We will get that, Prabhu. No problem with that. It captures multiple entry and exit points as well for devotees who are logging in, and probably sometimes because of the bad network, it drops off. Once again, they join. All those details are captured at the back end by the application itself gives those options.
No, but we have to look into all those things, and that's what I think in between, if we just have one survey kind of wherein we just enter the name and roll number.
We'll try that. We don't want to distract the class because, and again, we don't want to be disrespectful to His Grace.
Sorry, Prabhu, to interfere. Achyuta Prabhu, can you offline discuss with Rajnikant Prabhu and sort it out this?
Sure, Prabhu.
One more question, Prabhu. In the questionnaire, like in some sections of the question, like answer can be answered only in few texts. Is it mandatory? That why is it the restriction on that particular question? Only because of the answer, or?
So we wanted to keep the answers very crisp and succinct, and not elaborate. So if we are able to get those keywords in the response, that should be fine. When I was answering as well, I also felt that some words could not be put because there's a limitation on the number of words. But just looking out for the keywords and keep it very short. So essay questions which will come up later, those will be in an elaborate form, and that can be answered in detail. Okay, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, is there any other questions? Murlisham Prabhu, you have any point?
No, I want to know whether Asa Sindhu Prabhu or anybody wants to, organizers want to say something. other than you? If not, we can close the meeting. And as usual, if somebody can thank the devotees for participating, it will be nice.
Sindhu Prabhu, Premdata Prabhu.
Prabhu, no comments at this stage. But I think once the guidelines are finalized in the next couple of days,
okay,
we can probably, during the next session, at the end of the session, we can kind of run through the guidelines with all the participants so that, if there are any further clarifications required, we can have sort them out.
Okay. Okay, so when we are winding up towards the end, let us make one habit that we also thank all the devotees and pray at the lotus feet and also chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra once. Okay. So if there are no questions and no comments, we can wind up for today. Thank you everyone for joining the session, and I hope it is going to become more and more inspiring and more experiential learning. Thank you very much. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhudev. Sri Sri Radha Damodar Darshan.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.